Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's lawyers were busy over the weekend.
And Prince William's latest homeless initiative is making moves.
Hello and welcome to Heirs and Spares, your go-to for insight and opinion on two of the most talked about royal couples from both sides of the Atlantic. I'm Kinsey Schofield, and I'll be bringing you updates on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex here in California.
And I'm Katie Nicholl, and I'll be bringing you the latest on the Prince and Princess of Wales from, well, right here in the UK.
Okay, Katie, this is a story that's a few weeks old, but I saw a negative comment about how the Princess of Wales had abandoned her early years project. So I wanted to challenge that. Let's talk
Mm,
about Catherine's new campaign for preschoolers, because if you actually look into it, it's pretty impressive.
it is, and I don't sometimes understand why these negative comments pop up or these negative pieces. Sometimes you just think people do not have anything better to do. Let's just remember that the Princess of Wales is in remission from cancer. She's actually currently on summer holiday with her children, but that hasn't stopped her from carrying out a visit. And this is all to promote a new element to her very well known work around young people, the Early Years campaign. This is called Happy Little Minds, and it's really targeted at the youngest of children in the UK. So preschoolers, that sort of, I think you call it kindergarten, we call it nursery, those children who are around 3 and 4. And it's a new initiative that started up in Tower Hamlets and in Hackney. I think it's fair to say that they're both quite deprived areas of London. And it's a non-profit organisation. And as we're seeing with the Prince and Princess of Wales, they're bringing their charitable works together. So they're working with Barnardo's Children's Charity and Place to Be, of which Catherine is a patron. And that's the mental health charity for young people. So she's sort of bringing her expertise together and piloting this new scheme called Happy Little Minds, which is going to be working in nursery schools, as I say, in some of the most deprived areas of London. And I suppose, depending on the success of the project, we may well see more of these groundbreaking campaigns carried out around the rest of the country. So I think, yes, the criticism feels a little unfair because she's actually really quite busy spearheading new initiatives at the moment, even during her summer holidays.
Well, you mentioned that criticism, and Prince William's saying some of it too. Do you have an opinion on the Times piece that ran a few weeks ago? And it was supposed to be this like glowing profile on Princess Anne and how she's just this incredible, dedicated workhorse. She's not retiring till she's 90. But there were little swipes at Prince William throughout that piece about how he isn't taking on as much as he should. Do you look at what William and Catherine are doing and think to yourself, you know what, they're simply trying to set our expectations? There's this, at one point, he's going to be King William. Maybe they're just trying to manage our expectations. Maybe they're not going to be at every opening of every hospital, but they're creating these large initiatives that can last well beyond their lifetime.
I think you're absolutely right. They're not going to be opening every hospital, unveiling every plaque. William said a long time ago that he didn't want to be an ornamental royal. And that's not to knock the openings of hospitals and all the things that I think we associate with more traditional members of the royal family, including the late Queen Elizabeth II. I think it's very clear from Catherine's work, we've just been talking about the Early Years campaign, to William's work, and I know we're going to touch a little bit more on his fight for homelessness in London. But when you look at these initiatives, they are campaigns that they hope are going to have long lasting effects on our country. They will implement real change, and they will create a difference for the better for people who need it the most. I think if you sat down with Princess Anne, as I did back in 2020, and spoke with her, the one complaint that Princess Anne had at the time when I spoke to her was advising the younger generation of royals not to change course too much, not to try and do things too differently. I think she was very clearly talking about Harry and Meghan, who were off on a tangent and trying to break the royal mold and do things very differently. I don't for one minute think that she would be critical of William's homelessness project. I don't think she'd be critical of Kate's raising mental awareness for young people, the early years campaign. I think she'd champion it. Princess Anne has said she's not going to retire anytime soon. She does fit that sort of traditional blueprint of royal, but we can't expect the new generation of royals to do things exactly the same way as the old generation. When I spoke to her nearly, well, 5 years ago now, she said to me she wasn't going to retire. She said it wasn't really a word that applied to the royal family. But I think she does see the need to be an important pillar within the royal family. We've seen how she supports the king, but I think any suggestion that William hasn't pulled his weight, I think is unfair, because I think if you just cast your mind back to earlier this year, and of course Catherine was diagnosed with cancer, the king was diagnosed with cancer. The two senior members of the royal family who I think were really more than pulling their weight and really keeping the show on the roll were the Queen Camilla, and William. At a time for William when it must have been terribly, terribly difficult because of what his wife was going through. So I think, yes, to a degree, they're managing expectations. I think more than that, they're doing things their way. And I think they are sort of moving in a different direction to that traditional pattern of royal duty. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think we're very lucky to have the best of both worlds.
You're absolutely right. Getting to see both generations, and we don't know how the older generation will bleed into the new generation yet, but it's something for us to look forward to. What if you could delay your next two mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those two payments in your pocket and finally getting a little breathing room. It's possible when you call American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by everyday expenses, groceries, gas, bills piling up, you're not alone. Most Americans are putting these expenses on credit cards, and there doesn't seem to be a way out. American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off that debt. You need to call American Financing today before you get to a point where you can't make those payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you restructure their loans and consolidate debt, all without upfront fees. And their customers are saving an average of $800 a month. That's like a $10,000 raise. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer. Call before it's too late. 866-887-1201. That's 866-887-1201, or visit americanfinancing.net/unfiltered. Let's talk about Prince William's new campaign to, well, it's not really new. I feel like this is just another element. If things are actually moving forward, he's making progress. Things are being approved for his homeless initiative.
Yeah, they are, and it is moving. And this is a 5-year long campaign. I mean, it's an ambitious campaign, but when you consider what William's done for the first time, allowing housing for homeless people to be built on Duchy of Cornwall land, I mean, that's a real breakthrough. So he's really putting his money where his mouth is. He's following through on this. He said nearly 5 years ago that he wanted to eradicate homelessness in the UK. I mean, that is a tall order. I'm not sure he's going to achieve that, but he's certainly changing the landscape. And now in Lambeth, which is in South London, 16 new homes are set to be built in a partnership with his Duchy of Cornwall land and the Centrepoint charity. So a bit like we were saying, Kinsey, with Kate and her charities, these sort of merging together, these consolidating of their charities and their organisations to really make a difference. And actually, Duchy of Cornwall, when you consider all that land that the Duchy of Cornwall has, and Centrepoint, the biggest homeless charity in the UK, it's just a genius pairing. And Lambeth is the third area to have this type of new housing, following Aberdeen in Scotland and Sheffield in the north of England. So it's exciting, I think, for William. It's absolutely changing lives. It is homing people who are vulnerable. This is working for people within the age of 18 to 25 in the Lambeth area. Homeward says that it's going to provide affordable homes that act as a bridge between supported accommodation and the private rented sector. So it's trying to get homeless people out of shelters and into something more permanent, with a rent that they can afford, so that they can actually no longer be homeless and get onto the job ladder, afford to pay their rent, and have a permanent roof over their heads.
Not to go back, but when I look at something like this, And, these, like you said, this is a 5-year plan. Sometimes I wonder if these larger initiatives, and of course, yes, I know it's about Prince William's legacy. I know that this is a wonderful reflection on him and early years Catherine, the Princess of Wales. But I also wonder if they're trying to set their children up to have something that they can easily slide into. So we don't have a Prince Andrew. So we don't have a Prince Harry. There are all of these really creative, powerful campaigns that are happening that can live beyond their lifetime that I think their children could easily slide into and campaign and work with and find their purpose.
Yes, I mean, I think they will probably encourage their children to go and find their own philanthropic ventures and what resonates with them. I think they will encourage that independence. But I think you're right in that they're sort of showing them a template, they're giving them a foundation. So if we take William's Earthshot Foundation, which is, it is his equivalent of the moonshot, it is his vision to save the planet. That's nothing, that's not something that he's going to be able to do on his own. That's something that can be continued by the next generation, of course, George's generation. This is something that William has continued from his father, from Charles, and from his grandfather, from the Duke of Edinburgh. So I think there is that idea of legacy work, and within that idea of legacy is a generational element. So yes, I think they are. I think they are doing that. They're paving the way for the future. But I think more than that, it's their focus on the areas that they're passionate about. We know with Kate, that's early years and young people and mental health awareness.
Oh,
We
and
know with
even seeing
William.
all she's doing with art. Also, I love when I see her show up at a gallery or we've seen her curate exhibitions. I love that because I do know that that's something she truly is passionate about. So you're right, that's so important.
Well, I think it is because I think then it enables their work to be very authentic. And, don't forget, we saw William sleeping on the streets.
Mm.
We've never had a future king do that. He was taken to homeless charities and shelters as a young boy by Diana. She took him to the passage. These were experiences that have clearly stayed with him, that have shaped who he is, that have shaped the work that he's doing today. And I think you're probably right. He will want George and Charlotte and Louis to continue being passionate about those things. And if there is a lifelong campaign for environmentalism or a 10-year campaign, because hopefully it won't be lifelong, to eradicate homelessness in Britain, he will want his children to continue in his footsteps.
I want to ask you about this great piece you did for Vanity Fair. Before she died, Queen Elizabeth's first cousin revealed what the monarch thought of Harry and Meghan. And first of all, I want to thank you. I love Sally Bedell Smith. She's a friend of mine. And it disappointed me to see other royal commentators disparage the Jemima nickname. And you say in your piece, I heard the same
Oh
thing.
yeah.
So
Oh
thank
yeah,
you.
no, she did. No, 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 she absolutely did. And Sally did a brilliant job at revealing some of Lady Elizabeth's notes and the notes that she took from her meetings or conversations with the Queen. Sally, like myself, knew Elizabeth for many, many years, and Jemima was absolutely a nickname that Lady Elizabeth used for the late Queen. And I think, what was wonderful about these cousins was they had a very ordinary friendship in many ways. And Lady Elizabeth, both Sally and myself, never breached that confidence while the Queen was alive and while Lady Elizabeth was alive. The first time I wrote about some of Lady Elizabeth's notes and the late Queen's observations was in my book, The New Royals.
Yes.
There was a story in there about how the Queen had not disapproved, but had been surprised about Meghan wearing white on her wedding day, because being of that generation, you don't wear white second time round. Um, that quite interesting anecdote about Meghan getting a dressing down from the Queen after she'd been rude to some members of staff at Windsor Castle as part of the tasting test. And there were things in there that I'd been told, and I protected the source at the time. But I think enough time has passed now to shed light on some of those conversations and those recollections of Lady Elizabeth, because they are important historically. I mean, there were not many people that the Queen really confided in, probably a handful, and Lady Elizabeth was one of those people. And I think sometimes they just enjoyed a really good gossip. If I'm being honest, I think there was an element of that. And of course, the Queen couldn't do that with many people, but she could do it with Lady Elizabeth. Lady Elizabeth, because of her work, because of her line of work as a party planner, she got to host and cater for some of the biggest royal events, diamond anniversaries, jubilees, weddings. And of course, had a really interesting insight into what the Queen felt about Harry and Meghan. One of the things that she told me was that the Queen had given up Frogmore Cottage, which of course she did as their wedding present. And if the Queen wanted to walk in her gardens at Windsor Castle, she'd be in their essentially in their garden. And it was a walk that she loved to do. And, as the Queen had said to Lady Elizabeth, I really hope they appreciate this. She knew it was a very generous gesture. And I think there was a sense, certainly on Lady Elizabeth's part, that they hadn't been particularly grateful and that they hadn't made the Queen's twilight years particularly enjoyable. And when you consider the Duke of Edinburgh was very unwell in hospital when so much of this was going on, that caused the Queen a lot of distress. So I gleaned a lot from my conversations with Lady Elizabeth. I haven't printed all of it. I probably won't. I think there are some things that just don't need to be said. But, she did give a fascinating insight into the mind of a monarch. And I remember her telling me, and this was in the New Royals, that the Queen, when it came to Donald Trump, and you will remember that state visit that he did, he came to Windsor and he famously walked in front of the Queen. And she looked just quite surprised. It's absolute breach of protocol. And she said that she'd found him an enigma. And of course, we know how much Trump adored the Queen. She found him an enigma. So I think even all these years on after her death, those sorts of insights are really quite fascinating.
They are. In your Vanity Fair piece, you say of Lady Elizabeth, she tells you it's so sad that at her age, Queen Elizabeth, having managed the most amazing reign, it has been sullied. He has hurt her beyond belief. First of all, that just rips my heart out, that last sentence. But do you believe it was Lady Elizabeth Anson that felt Harry and Meghan had sullied the end of her reign? Or do you think Queen Elizabeth was concerned about that herself at the time?
I think probably it was Elizabeth Anson's interpretation, and it was based on conversations that she had with the Queen. But I do know from the late Lady Elizabeth that the Queen was very disappointed with how Harry and Meghan chose to exit, that it was all done very suddenly. It was all executed in a way that no one, not least of all the Queen, had expected. And that idea that he could just turn his back on duty, I think for our late Queen, who had, duty running through her DNA, and it was the unthinkable for her after the abdication. I just think that pained her deeply. And don't forget that she loved Harry. You
Yeah.
know, she loved Harry, and she would speak to Elizabeth and recall the Queen would speak to her cousin Elizabeth and recall the conversations that she was having with them while they were first in Canada and then in LA. And of course, she's watching her grandchildren grow up. Um, Hundreds of miles away from her, and I think that upset her too. And I think on a human level, she missed that, and she missed Harry. But I think she felt let down. I think she felt let down by how they did it.
Before we move on, I just had one more question for you. Sally Bedell Smith told me last week that Lady Elizabeth Anson, she had not written this in her Substack, but had told her that some of the royal cousins were purposely excluded from Harry and Meghan's guest list to make room for some strangers, like celebrities, like George and Amal Clooney. Reese Witherspoon said, I was invited. And I said, I'm not going to go. I don't know either one of them. Lady Elizabeth's advice to Queen Elizabeth was, you know what? Let's put all of our energy into Princess Eugenie's wedding. That will be the family wedding. And I thought that the term family wedding was so important, that this would give the Queen an opportunity to be surrounded by love and to feel that appreciation that she lacked at Harry, and that familiarity that she lacked at Harry and Meghan's wedding. Does that surprise you, or had you heard something similar?
No, I hadn't actually. I hadn't heard that. So it's interesting to hear Sally's perspective on that. Certainly, I think there was a lot of surprise over how star-studded Harry and Meghan's guest list was, and some raised eyebrows in royal quarters over the likes of Oprah and the Clooneys being invited when, these people were not aware of any close and meaningful relationship between Harry and those celebrities. When it comes to perhaps the more estranged cousins or estranged family members, I do remember at the time of Kate and William's wedding, that William was given the chance to sort of strip back the very official guest list that he'd been given by the Lord Chamberlain, when there were a lot of names that he didn't recognise, particularly with foreign royals and heads of states. And the Queen said, no, we rip the list up and start again. It needs to be your friends. And I think she would have wanted it to have been the wedding that Harry and Meghan wanted. And it was, they shunned the services, in fact, of Lady Elizabeth Anson in favour of a different florist, and they did do things differently. I think the Queen would have wanted them to be surrounded by their friends. I just think there was some surprise over how many celebrities there were at the actual wedding. But don't forget, Kinsey, Eugenie and Jack's wedding was quite star-studded too.
Robbie Williams.
Um,
Yeah.
that was pretty star-studded as well. They mix in pretty fabulous circles too. So it wasn't something that I'd heard, but I think there was that story in Sally's Substack, and I had also heard it, that Harry and Meghan had gone straight to the Archbishop of Canterbury asking him to marry them, when actually the correct protocol was for the Dean of Windsor to marry them with the Archbishop of Canterbury, because it was at Windsor. So it was things like that. And when you consider the Queen was such a stickler for detail and heritage and tradition and frankly good manners and respect, I think it's those things that disappointed her.
Oh, ooh. Well, I will ask. I don't think we should spend much time on this story because I feel like we're in limbo of seeing where things go here. Big legal moves from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle this week. And I say that because they've been silent on kind of the litigation front lately. But according to Newsweek, they've sent letters to the Daily Mail arguing calling the Andrew Loney, Prince Andrew allegations, libelous. They're saying that this physical fight between Prince Andrew and Prince Harry in 2013 never happened, and that Prince Andrew never said these disparaging things about Meghan Markle. I do kind of think we're in limbo to see if the Daily Mail takes any official position here or if Andrew Loney has to backtrack at all. But does it surprise you that they might be going in this direction again? Because it's kind of been quiet on the Harry and Meghan versus the press front.
It has, Kinsey, it has gone quiet. But they've really taken the front to something, and clearly they have here. Um, we know that this is a couple who are litigious and who do see big publications through the courts. So I think you're right. I think it is a little bit in limbo. I haven't spoken to Andrew about his sourcing. I can't believe that he or his editor, or indeed the publishers, would have let such a thing go through unless he had a pretty copper bottom source on it. But I think we'll have to wait and see. I mean, all I would say, I don't know whether the story is true or not. So I preface this with saying that. But of course, we learnt through Harry's book, didn't we, of a physical altercation between William and Harry. Of course, the fight where Harry ended up being shoved over the dog food bowl. So, royals get in scrapes and scraps, shall we say. It wouldn't be the first time, but was Andrew and, did Andrew and Harry come to actual blows, physical blows? I don't know. But I suspect that if Andrew had voiced that, and Andrew can be very pompous and forthright and speak his mind in a way that people can frankly find very rude, Harry may well have taken umbrage to that, because let's not forget, when William voiced concern to Harry to just take things easy, slow down a bit once this engagement was announced, Harry didn't like it. I mean, that was the beginning of them falling out.
That's such a good point. Well, thank you so much for your insight. Agree with us, disagree with us, let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Katie Nicholl, so good to see you. You look gorgeous. You're glowing with that tan.
Thank you. You look beautiful too. It's lovely to see you.
I like that my lips match your nails. I'll pretend like we did it on purpose. All right.
Of course we did it on purpose.
All right, we'll see you again next week. Thanks so much, everyone.